I'm Jolene Wynn, and this is the Porn Addict's Wife podcast, episode number 163, What is Life Coaching? I used to think of myself as the wife of a porn addict, but I do not think of myself that way anymore, and you don't have to either. In this podcast, I am going to teach you how to manage your mind and your emotions so that you can stop living your life around your husband's pornography addiction. I am going to teach you how to stop being the victim and how to conquer his pornography addiction, even if he never does. I'm Jolene Wynn. I am a certified life coach, and I am a member of the LDS faith and the wife of a former porn addict. And this is a podcast for the porn addict's wife. Hello, my ladies. How are you today? I hope you guys are having a great weekend. I had a really, really good week, and it was not the week that I expected. And I'm going to tell you a little bit about it. I was supposed to go to California this week. I am in a business mastermind with Jody Moore, and I was supposed to go to California this week for our third in-person meeting. And I was supposed to leave on Tuesday morning. And on Monday night, if you guys listened to the podcast last week, which was last Monday, and I was talking about how some days are just hard. And my husband and I, you guys know, have been going through a lot of stuff over the last 7 months. And we went through a lot last weekend, and on Monday night, my husband and I were talking, and it was really good, and we were in a pretty good place, but he sat down and he said, you know what, he asked me to stay, is what happened. He asked me to stay and to not go to California, and instead to stay home and be with him and keep moving forward together and keep having conversations and help him process emotions and help coach him a little bit and keep working through this together. And so that is what I did, because my priority will always be my family, 100%. And so that is what I did. My relationship with my husband, our healing is always the most important thing to me. And so I made that happen. I canceled my flight. I just, ate the $1,200 ticket. And I was able to join on Zoom for most of the calls, which was, I'm just so grateful that, I messaged the Jody Moore team and I, explained that I needed to be home, and they were so great, and they made an exception, and they, let me come in via Zoom on the calls, on the meetings, and it was so good. But I wanted to share that with you because sometimes I want to do a separate podcast on this about auditing your priorities. But sometimes we can get a little lost in the weeds. We can get a little lost in, well, how much money is this? And I spent so much money. You guys, I spent $25,000 to join this business mastermind. I paid for it in September. I did not have $25,000, but I paid for it in September, and it's been so amazing. And I paid $1,200 for a ticket, and I had a hotel booked, and I was going to meet all these people, and they had expectations, and none of those mattered in my head. It didn't matter. As soon as my husband asked me to stay, and I had even kind of thought about it already, but as soon as he asked me to stay, I said, yes, this is exactly what I need to be doing. And it doesn't matter the money that I'm losing or spending. It doesn't matter. That is not the priority. The money is not the priority. What is the priority is my husband and our relationship and our emotional healing. And I do want to do a podcast on that, on auditing your priorities, because there can be a discrepancy that I found between, and I do this a lot. This is actually my New Year's resolution this year, was to audit my priorities and say, okay, where am I saying this is my priority, and is that actually matching up with the rest of my life, right? I might say that, God and my family are the most important things to me, but is that being reflected in my life? Does that make sense? I might say that it's really important to me to get in physical, good physical shape, but is that actually reflected in my life, in the results that I'm making, in the choices that I'm making? And this week was a big full circle moment for me, was to just, it really wasn't even a hard decision. It didn't matter that I'd spent $25,000 on this mastermind. It didn't matter that I'd spent $1,200 on this plane ticket to get there and that I was just going to lose it. It didn't matter. I didn't care. That is not what was most important to me. And so this week, instead of going to California from Tuesday to Saturday, instead I was home, and it was amazing. And my husband and I have been growing so much and made so much progress, and we can't wait to share it with you, actually. So make sure you guys are still listening to the podcast. Make sure you're subscribed, because over the next couple of months, as we continue to heal and move forward, and as we continue to work through this, he and I have both felt more confident in the last week than ever that we are going to be sharing this on the podcast with you, because we want you guys to be able to take what we've learned, and I know it's going to help so many of you in your situations. So that is what happened this week. And it was unexpected, but it was beautiful. Okay. And today I was talking to my husband. I had 3 different ideas for my podcast, as I normally do. And I told him all 3, and he was like, those aren't awesome. I don't think you should do any of those. What I think you should do is I think you should tell them about life coaching and why it's amazing and why they should come work with you. And I said, okay, great. So that is what I'm doing. Today I want to talk to you about life coaching and what it is. And I want to start off with a story because this is really funny. When I decided to do life coach training, I spent $18,000. Let me back up. I started listening to podcasts. That is how I got introduced to life coaching and mindset and all of those things. I started listening to Jody Moore. She is a life coach. She's an LDS life coach, and she has a podcast called Better Than Happy. It's amazing. That is what I was introduced to. I was introduced to it through a friend who introduced it to my twin sister, and my twin sister said, you have got to come listen to this. So I started listening to that, and that led me to the Life Coach School podcast with Brooke Castillo, and that is amazing, and you should listen to it. And both of those just completely changed my life so much. I started understanding my natural inclination to process my emotion, but I understood it on a deeper level. I began to learn more about how my mind works and how to manage my mind and how to stop yelling at my kids, which was why I started listening to the podcast in the first place. That was my goal. I knew I was yelling at my kids. I didn't like yelling at my kids. I knew at the end of the day, all I wanted to do was just if we could just make it to 7 p.m. and put them to bed so that I can watch Netflix, that's all I wanted. Right? That was I just need to get to 7 o'clock and put everybody to bed. But I didn't love that was my whole goal at the end, was just to get to the end of the day where my kids went to bed. That's not the mom I wanted to be. So that's why I started listening to this, because that's what was working and helping for my sister. And I said, that's exactly what I need. It's exactly what I want. Right? And so I started listening to these podcasts, and I just realized that there were so many women out there who needed women like you, right? Women who had spouses that were struggling with pornography, that didn't know about how to manage your mind and didn't know about how to manage your emotions. And all of the research I did, all I could see was a whole bunch of groups and women with the best of intentions telling me over and over and over that as the wife of the porn addict, I just had to wait for him to get better. I just had to wait for him to start getting his act together and to stop relapsing. And that even when he did, I was going to have a marriage full of distrust and betrayal trauma for the rest of my life. And I did not like that answer. I also saw just over and over again so many women just railing on their spouses, just hating their husband. And I didn't hate my husband. It would be so much easier if I did, right? I mean, back me up, ladies. It would be so much easier if we hated the husband. That would be easier, but we don't. We actually love the poor idiot. We love him so much. And that's part of the thing that's hard, is the discrepancy between the two. How do I love this man and also hate what he's doing, right? So that was going on inside me. And as I realized how to work through this, as I started applying all the tools that I was learning, my husband and I decided that I should become a life coach. And so I spent $18,000 and I signed up for life coach training. And that summer, this was 4 years ago, and that summer we went on a trip with my family, and I was talking to my sister-in-law and with my whole family all together and with my sister-in-law, and she said, I think one of us said, hey, I signed up for life coach training. I'm going to become a life coach. She was like, well, what's a life coach? And it was just crickets in my brain, because honestly, I had no idea. I didn't know. I was like, I don't know, really. And my sister Christy answered, and she was like, Tony Robbins? And she said, yeah, I know Tony Robbins. And she was like, well, it's like that. Tony Robbins is a life coach. And I sat there and I was like, I don't know who Tony Robbins is. So if you guys don't know who Tony Robbins is, I didn't either 4 years ago. And that's totally fine. But I just sat there and I was like, well, I'm glad Christy answered this question, because I don't actually have an answer to this question. I had no idea what life coaching was. All I knew was that I had been listening to these podcasts, and they had helped me so much that they had completely changed my life, and I was all in for more of it. That's all I knew. I didn't care what life coaching was. I didn't care how you defined it. I just knew that these podcasts that I had been listening to had completely changed me. Emotionally, mentally, I was a different person, and I was all in for more of it. Okay? So if you ask me now versus 4 years ago, what is life coaching? I will tell you. My job as a life coach is to help you learn how to regulate your emotions and manage your mind. That's not very sexy. That is not a very fun answer, okay? But I'm going to go over it a little bit more with you. This is what I used to do on consultation calls that I don't do anymore, but I used to get on calls one-on-one with people who wanted to coach with me, and I would talk about where they were, and I would explain to them over and over and over, here's what I do, and here's what I tell them, is The number one thing that I do, I teach you two main things. One is to learn how to manage your emotions, and two is how to manage your mind, okay? So that you can be in control of both. Okay, and it's two pieces. And the thing about life coaching is a lot of times in the mental space and a lot of time in the mind management space, they only focus on one. They only focus on the mind management part, which is a lot of what this podcast does, because that's how I can teach you via podcast, is I'm teaching you how to do, what to do. I'm teaching you the what. Okay, here's what to do. Here's the layout of how to start managing your mind and how to shift your thoughts. And I have so many women, I'm getting ahead of myself, but I have so many women who will message me and say, I've been listening to your podcast for 6 months or a year and it's helped me so much, but I feel like I can only get so far. I start to implement it and it starts to change, but then something will happen and I'll get triggered and then I'll be right back where I started. So I feel like I'm not progressing. Of course not, because there's two pieces to this. And this is why I have a coaching program and not just a podcast. I can teach you a ton of the mind management skills on the podcast. I can teach you what to do. How to do it is what I teach inside my coaching program, which is why I have a coaching program, because it's very, very difficult to learn just from a podcast how to change and then start implementing those changes on your own. Right? Because you have no idea if you're doing it correctly. Most of us aren't. And the reason most of us aren't is because we're missing that emotional management piece. Here's what happens. It's like we have little buckets of emotion inside of us. Every emotion that we feel feels differently inside of our bodies. And it's like we have a little bucket for every emotion, a bucket for joy and a bucket for sadness and a bucket for grief and a bucket for ecstasy and a bucket for anticipation and a bucket for betrayal. And all of those buckets get filled over time. When you don't know how to manage your emotions, what we end up doing is we just keep adding to the bucket. But eventually the bucket starts to overflow. And when the bucket overflows, it starts to create a result in our life that we see. And that is typically when we become aware that our bucket is full. We don't usually become aware that we're filling the bucket because it's fine, right? We're like, it's okay, everything's good, I can just shove this down, not a problem. But when it comes to a point where we can't shove it down anymore because we have now overflowed the bucket, we are at our max capacity and now we are more than our max capacity, then what happens is it starts to create a result. This is why I was yelling at my kids, because my bucket of frustration was so high and so full, and I didn't know how to manage that. I didn't know how to feel frustrated without reacting to it and yelling at my kids. I would just let the bucket of frustration build and build and build until it overflowed. And because I didn't know how to feel my feelings very well, then what I would do is I would just react to my feelings instead, and I would yell at my kids. So there was a result that it was creating in my life that I saw, and I didn't know how to change it. You guys with me on this? So many of you, think of the result that you have right now, whether it's you don't trust your husband, or you second guess every time he initiates sex, or maybe it's that you are afraid to leave the house or leave him by himself, or you have anxiety anytime an attractive waitress comes to the table, or you get triggered every time you go to the beach. These are the results that are created from your overfilled emotional buckets. Does this make sense? Now, what I teach in my coaching program, this is what a huge focus of my coaching program is, and I do this one-on-one with each of my clients, is teach you how to go internally and process that emotion. What that's like is we go in on purpose and scoop out a little bit of emotion at a time. We go into each bucket and we scoop it out. We drain it. This is literally why it's called emotional baggage, right? It's because we have bags of emotion that we're just carting around from our past. This is why I know that it's possible to work through and move forward past your husband's pornography problem, even if he isn't, because what his pornography problem is doing is not creating your problems. It's bringing them to the surface, right? I say this all the time. My husband's pornography problem did not create my insecurity and my self-consciousness. I have been self-conscious and insecure since I was 11, probably even before that, right? So all it did was it brought it to the surface. It became my opportunity to look at it. But when we get stuck in betrayal trauma and we get stuck blaming the husband for his issues and his problems, and we say, you're the reason why I'm insecure because you're looking at other women online, that is when we lose our ability to control our lives. That's when we hand over control to him. And it's very tempting because our brain thinks that if we don't do that, that means that we are somehow at fault. It's like, well, what? Is it my fault then that I feel insecure? No, it's nobody's fault. There is no blame required. But I do want to tell you that you can take responsibility for your emotions and your mind And that's exactly the best news that I could ever tell you, because once you start taking responsibility for the way that you think and the way that you feel, that is when you can start changing the results that you see in your life, so that you don't have to cringe every time he reaches to kiss you, so that you don't have to have anxiety every time he's on his phone, so that you don't have to avoid family vacations to the beach because it brings up all of your stuff. Because there's no longer any stuff to bring up. I talked about this a couple weeks ago when I was talking about how to handle triggering situations. The secret to overcoming triggers and to understanding triggers is that they need to trigger something in order to be powerful. And once you work through what they are triggering, then there's nothing left. Then it doesn't matter how many triggers you're around, it's irrelevant because they're not triggering anything. That's the emotional baggage. When you have emotional baggage, when you have things underneath, emotions underneath that you haven't dealt with, insecurities, beliefs you have about yourself that you're not good enough, then those will always be there until you take the opportunity to look at them. And it doesn't just mean managing your mind. It also means learning how to regulate your emotions, how to feel your feelings. And this is a skill, a practical skill that no one's ever taught you before. So it's okay that you don't know how to do it. I promise you don't know how to do it. You're probably doing it wrong, even if you think you're doing it, okay? And that's okay. No one's ever taught it to you before, which is exactly why I have a job, because this is what I teach. I teach you how to do it. I walk you through it, because otherwise you're just going to take those buckets of emotion throughout the rest of your life and keep filling them and keep just shoving it down until you get to the next thing, and then it overflows, and then you just let off enough steam to get to the next experience, and then you tamp it back down and you shove it back down and you just keep powering through. And that's totally fine, except that it's an exhausting way to live through life, and it creates results we don't like. It creates the distrust, it creates the insecurity, it creates the doubt, it creates the relationship that you have within yourself that you don't like, and the relationship with your spouse that you don't like. Does this make sense? So my job as a life coach is to help you get out of your own way so that you can have the life you want. It is not my job to tell you what to do. I don't make decisions for you. I don't tell you that you should leave your husband or that you should lose weight or that you should put out more. No, my job is to help you become aware of those subconscious beliefs that are getting in the way. All of those emotions underneath the surface that we don't even know are there. All of those buckets of frustration, I didn't even know it was there. I just knew that I was yelling at my kids and I didn't like it because I felt like a bad mom. I didn't even know that I had this belief about what a good mom was and that a good mom shouldn't yell at her kids. I had no idea until I started life coaching. And that is when I became aware of these subconscious beliefs that I had about myself and beliefs about what should be happening and how it should be happening. And all I knew was that I had to go help people learn this, because those subconscious beliefs, again, create physical, tangible results in our life. So my job as a coach is to help you become aware of them so that you can choose to change them if you want to. I will never make you change a belief you have about yourself, but I will help you see it so that you can become aware of it and then decide whether or not you want to keep it. Does that make sense? So on the podcast, you learn a lot of what to do. That's what I'm able to convey in this platform. Okay, I can't sit here and have a coaching call with you because that's not how this platform works. That's why I have coaching calls and master classes and all those things. But that's why I have a coaching program. On this podcast, I teach you what to do. And when you work with me, when you join my coaching program, that is when I help you learn how to actually apply it and make the changes that you want to, that you're trying to, from the podcast. Does this make sense? I kind of just thought of it a little analogy, if it helps, okay? It's like a professional sports coach, okay? Think of professional teams. They all have coaches, okay? The players already know how to play the game. They already know what to do. Here's a basketball. Here's the objective. Get it in the hoop. Here's the positions. They know all the basics. They know how to dribble. In fact, professional athletes actually know way more than the basics. They have a lot of skills, but they still have a coach. And the coach helps them become even better because the coach analyzes and shows them what they're doing and how they can tweak it in order to improve themselves and become an even greater player, an even better version of themselves. That is my job as a coach. That's why I'm called a coach. My job is to come in and help you see the things that you can't see because you are already in it. This is the example I always give. It's like we become so comfortable with the way that our brain thinks that we don't even realize that our brain is thinking that way. Our brain operates with certain thoughts. Our brain operates in a certain way that is so familiar that we don't even hear it anymore. Does this make sense? It's kind of like I always say this. If you have kids, you know what I'm talking about. It's like that annoying toy that grandma gave them for Christmas, and it makes so much noise, and it's really high pitched, and it sings a song every time you press this button, and your kids can't stop pressing it. And they open it for Christmas, and you're like, oh my gosh, we're going to have to take the batteries out of this thing when this baby goes to sleep, because there is no way I can handle this noise. And for the first day, that noise is really triggering, and it brings up all your frustration and all the thoughts that you have about your mom and the gifts she gives or whatever it is. And eventually what happens is you hear that noise so much that your brain just tunes it out. And that's exactly what happens to our thoughts. At first, we might be very aware of our thoughts, especially in new situations. Our brain gets very aware and very alert of what's going on. However, most of the time what happens is our brain can't operate with that much intensity and focus on every thought we have. We have over 60,000 thoughts a day. Did you guys know this? Your brain you cannot be consciously aware of all of those thoughts. Your brain learns what is important and what is not, and it will tune out what is not important, but it doesn't mean that those thoughts are not there. They have just gone subconscious. This makes sense? So my job as a coach is to come help you understand and to realize what it is that's happening in the background. My job is like, I come in and I'm like, hey, do you guys hear that really annoying toy? And you're like, oh, I don't even hear it anymore because it's been playing so much that my brain has tuned it out. However, when we do that with our thoughts, what we're doing is our subconscious thoughts create actual physical, tangible results in our lives. Just like I was saying, like yelling at my kids, right? The tensing up every time he wants to kiss you, right? All of that, those are physical, tangible results in our lives that are being created by our subconscious thoughts. And they're called subconscious for a reason. We aren't even aware of what they are. We just know that what's happening is that I don't trust him and I don't know why and I don't like it. That's it. What I know is that I haven't forgiven him yet and I don't know how. What's happened yet is I know that I'm still hurt and I've tried to move through it, but I don't know how. And then we have these physical, tangible results that we have in our life and in our relationship, and we want to change them and we don't know how. That's where I come in. This is my job as a coach. When you come work with me, which I really would love for all of you to do, my job is to help you see what's going on in the background. That makes sense? So that and then I'm going to teach you tools with how to work through it, how to process out all of that pain, how to see the layers of thoughts and beliefs that are generating that emotion, and then how to process it and let it go. The steps that I teach in my program are very simple. I have a 5-step process. Number 1 is awareness. I teach you and help you become aware of all of those subconscious things. Number 2 is acceptance, learning how to let go of all of the judgment because we just end up adding layers that we don't even need. Number 3 is processing your emotion. This is where I spend so much of my time with my clients, and I do this one-on-one with them, is learning how to process your emotions so that you can become the expert. I do a one-on-one call with every single one of my clients so that they can become the expert at processing their emotions. Step number 4 is we get to choose new thoughts. Okay, the reason that you have the emotions that you have is because of the way that your brain thinks. Our thoughts are what create our feelings. And this is the best news ever because this means that you don't have to wait for your husband to get his act together before you start moving forward because his behavior is not creating your pain. Your thoughts about his behavior is creating your pain. Again, best news ever. I'm not telling you that it's invalid. I'm not telling you that you're making it up. I am telling you that it is possible to heal and start moving forward even if he continues his behavior. That's what I'm telling you. Doesn't make it okay. Doesn't mean you're indifferent. It doesn't mean any of those things. What it means is that you have the ability to start moving forward. And this is the best news I could give you. This was the news that nobody ever told me. In fact, I was told the opposite. Like I said, I was told that as long as my husband was going to continue this behavior, then our marriage was doomed. He was a jerk. Should just settle into the fact that I was going to have betrayal trauma for the rest of my life and I was just going to have to live with triggers and that's just the lot in life that I was given because my husband chose to be addicted to pornography. That's it. That's what I was told. Once an addict, always an addict. Ladies, I do not believe it. And I don't believe it because I changed it for myself and I've helped hundreds of women do it. And I want to help you do it too. You can learn that your thoughts create your feelings. And when you learn that, that is what gives you all the power back in your life so that you don't have to wait for your circumstances to change before you start to heal and move forward. And it's not just about feeling better because I am not ever going to tell you that you should be okay with your husband watching porn. I still choose to think that that I'm not okay with pornography, which means that if my husband chooses to relapse today, that I will feel emotional pain because of it, because I choose to think it's not okay for him to do. And I will never tell anybody that they have to change their thought about that. You can keep it. But what's happening right now is you have all of these buckets of emotion that are already filled to the brim. So anytime he does relapse, then it overflows and it creates a result that you can't handle. Does this make sense? Does it sound accurate? Right? So what I teach you how to do is how to let go. Once we let go of all of those buckets of emotion, once we have processed those and moved through that, those buckets are empty. So that if he relapses, will you feel a little bit of a negative emotion? Yes, absolutely. And that is okay. In fact, I think you want to because you don't want to be okay with him watching porn. And if you aren't okay with him watching porn, then you're probably going to feel a little bit of negative emotion if he does. And I'm all in for that, okay? But right now, the thing that's making it the hardest is that it's triggering all of these buckets of emotion that are completely overflowing. We feel completely overwhelmed. And that's when we break down and we feel like we can't do it anymore. Does this sound familiar? My job is to help you learn how to process all of that and let it go so that then you can choose to think new thoughts if you want to. There may be some thoughts that you totally want to keep, like I just gave you an example of, but some of them maybe you want to change. Maybe you don't have to believe that there's something wrong with you if your husband watches porn, but maybe you become aware of that and we can change it. That's a very common example. Another example that I see all the time is many of my clients are moms. And most of them believe that they're not a good mom. I used to have the same thought. And my thought was, I'm not a good mom because I yell at my kids. And then I became aware enough to change the things that I believed about myself. And I decided to no longer believe that. I decided to believe I was a good mom, even if I occasionally yelled at my kids. And I also learned what the cycle was that was creating me yelling at my kids. And I changed it. I do not yell at my kids as much as I did anymore. Sometimes does it still happen? Yes, I'm not perfect, right? I always give this example too. The most life-altering work that I have done, and I'm teaching about this week in my How to Not Hate Your Body Masterclass. It's free. You can come sign up on my website. This is the work that changed my life more than anything else aside from learning how to process the pain of my husband's pornography problem. Okay. It was learning the thoughts that I thought about myself and my body and learning how to let go of to drain all of those buckets of emotion, all the insecurity, self-conscious, not confident, all of those buckets that I was holding on to as part of my identity, and learning how to retrain my brain to no longer perpetuate that same belief. Okay. And that's step number 4 in my coaching program, the process that I teach. Number 1, awareness. Number 2, acceptance. Number 3, processing the emotion. Number 4, choosing a new thought. And number 5, retraining your brain. Practicing those new beliefs, learning the skill, learning the tools that you need to develop the skill of mastering your mind and your emotions. That is what I teach in my program, and I help you every step along the way. I am able to still coach my clients one-on-one on these group calls. And if you want to learn what it's more like to coach with me, you can go to my website. You can sign up today. You get lifetime access to all of my online material, to all of my coaching calls that I do twice a week. And it's only $4,000, which, yes, is a lot of money. But when you think about the lifetime access and all of the material that I have for you, I have curated a specifically designed program. I have designed a course online that is specifically for you. If you think this podcast is good, you will love my online program. It is video modules, hours and hours and hours, more hours than I think any of my clients could ever watch, of video content where I am teaching you how to actually apply the things that you're learning on the podcast. If you are loving what you're learning on the podcast and you want more of it, you want more help, you want to be able to see a more tangible result. If there's something where you're stuck, come coach with me. This is the invitation. If you want more of this, then I have it for you. All you have to do is go sign up, and I have a payment plan available because yes, it's expensive. It is 100%. I'm with you guys, but nobody is ever going to have the amount of money of $4,000. This happens a lot. I talk to women all the time who are like, oh man, I really want to join and it is just too much money. It's just not in my budget. Ladies, it's never going to be in your budget. Ever. I never did this. Nobody's ever had $4,000 just sitting aside in case my husband has a pornography problem and I need to get help budget. It's not going to happen. But if you want to do this, you can find a way. You can pay in full, you get a discount, or you can just split it up over 6 months. And that might make it a little bit easier for you. But either way, even if I made it free, ladies, I had people that wouldn't take it. Do you want to know why? Because you have to determine for yourself that this is something you want to do. And if this isn't for you, then that's totally fine. I completely understand. But for most of you guys who are still listening to the podcast, you're here still for a reason. And I would love to help you get to the place where you are where you want to be and you are making the changes that you want to make. I had a client who joined a week ago, 2 weeks ago, and she sent me a message. It was amazing. It made my day. She sent me a message and she asked me a question and I answered it. And she said, I've been going to therapy for years and you just blew my mind with one answer. And that was over a message. My clients can message me. They get to come to my coaching calls and they can also message me on a private communication app that we have. And she just sent me a message and I answered with like 2 questions and it blew her mind. And that's the other thing too, is this is not therapy. I'm not a therapist. Okay. The difference between therapy and coaching, which is a question that I get a lot. What is the difference? There are many, many different kinds of therapy. I will never knock therapy. My husband made lots of progress using therapy. Sometimes therapy, depending on the approach that you take or the kind of therapy that you're having, is more of a talk therapy. Traditional therapy is more talk therapy, where it's focused more on you coming and just almost venting. But there is very little practical skills that are being taught to you to help you change the result that you're creating. So I would say that's probably the biggest difference, is that I am very focused on practical skills that I teach you and help you apply and implement in your life so that you can have physical, tangible results. It's not just a venting session. It's you coming and saying, I'm struggling with this and I want to learn. I want to know how I can change it, what I can do. It's very self-focused, not in a selfish way, but in a way where you are admitting that you have responsibility. You are taking responsibility for what you can control and focusing on that. And that is what creates all the change in your life. Because what happens when we get stuck, the reason I think women get stuck in betrayal trauma is that they stop focusing on themselves and they start focusing on their spouse. They get stuck focusing on what they can't control. And when you're focusing on what you can't control, your brain gets very overwhelmed, very anxious, and very defeated, right? And that is the opposite of what I teach. I teach you how to focus inward, how to reflect, how to look at what you can control. And that is where all of your power and ability to change your life happens, because you are looking at what you can do rather than on what you can't do. And I'm here to help you see what you can. And when you can see everything that is within your control, that is exciting, that is empowering, and that is what is life-changing. Okay? So as a life coach, my job is to teach you the emotional and mental skills so that you feel confident in your ability to handle any situation. This is why it's possible to move forward even if your husband is still relapsing, because you know you have confidence in yourself, in your ability to handle it. That is what is life-changing. And if that is what you want, then I want to encourage you to sign up with me today. You can go to my website, jolenewind.com. You can sign up for lifetime access to me today. Get in today. I will help you. I will work with you, and we will figure out all the things that are holding you back and keeping you stuck, and we will change them so that you can finally start moving forward. I can't wait to see you there, and I'll see you on the next coaching call. I love you ladies so much, and I'll see you next week. Take care. Hello, my lady. I wrote a book, and I would love for you to read it. It's called The Not Enough Wife, and you can get it on Amazon today. This book is for any woman who has ever felt like she wasn't enough, not enough as a wife or as a mom, if she didn't have Instagram-worthy enough pictures, if she didn't throw Pinterest-worthy parties, if she ever felt like she was not enough, this is the book for her, and it's for you too. So go to Amazon today, go search up The Not Enough Wife by Jolene Wynn, and grab a copy for yourself and for all the women in your life. I hope you love it, and I can't wait to hear what you think.